The silk curtains swayed gently in the dimly lit bedroom, the air thick with the scent of jasmine perfume and something much heavier, desire. The bed beneath her felt foreign, though it was her own. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the sheets, her eyes fixed on the man lying beside her. She whispered, almost in disbelief, "I don't know how this happened, but I want it to stop." Her voice cracked, betraying both fear and hunger. She was 52, a widow draped in diamonds and loneliness. He was 31, the driver her late husband had hired years before his death. A man of muscle and silence, whose eyes spoke more than his words ever did. But here they were. Their bodies glistened with the evidence of what they had just done, what they could no longer deny. For weeks, the walls of the Okoye mansion had echoed with emptiness. The death of Chief Balogun, her husband, had turned her from the glowing hostess of Lagos society into a recluse draped in black. Friends had stopped visiting, her children lived abroad, and each night she dined alone at a long mahogany table meant for 20. Her only constant presence was him, Michael, the driver. He had been there through the tears, through the silent drives to the cemetery, through the nights when she couldn't even step out of the car because her knees had gone weak with grief. It began innocently. He would linger a little longer at the gate, asking if she needed help with groceries. He carried her shopping bags inside. He fixed the light bulb that had been flickering above her dressing mirror. And one evening, when she spilled a glass of wine in the living room, he bent down to clean it, so close that she felt the warmth of his breath on her wrist. That was the first time she realized she was watching him, not as a servant, not as a driver, but as a man. She hated herself for it. What would her children say if they ever suspected? A wealthy widow and her much younger driver? Lagos gossip would eat her alive. And yet, when she looked at him, she didn't see the class divide or the age gap. She saw strength. She saw someone who was alive, while she felt like she was slowly dying. The night it happened was like any other, until it wasn't. She had returned from a charity event, her dress clinging to her figure, her heels clicking against marble floors. Her loneliness was unbearable that evening. She had smiled at everyone at the event, yet come home emptier than ever. Michael greeted her at the door, his shirt slightly unbuttoned from the heat of the day. She asked for water, and when he handed her the glass, his fingers brushed hers. Her hand lingered, his eyes met hers, and before she could think, she had kissed him. The shock of it made her pull back instantly. "I'm sorry," she had whispered, mortified. But he didn't move. He didn't run. Instead, his hand cupped her face gently, reverently, as if she were porcelain. Then he kissed her back, deeply, hungrily, as though he had been holding back for years. Now, lying in the aftermath, reality was crashing down on her. She turned to him, trying to sound stern even as her heart pounded. "This cannot continue. I'm old enough to be your mother." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that melted all her defenses. "You're not my mother. You're a woman, and you're beautiful." Her chest tightened. She wanted to resist. She wanted to push him away, but her body betrayed her, because what she felt wasn't shame anymore. It was life. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt the fire of being desired. She pressed her palms against his chest, as if to create distance, but instead she traced the curve of his muscles, the warmth of his skin. Her voice shook when she said, "Michael, this is madness." He leaned in, his lips grazing her ear. "Then let's be mad together." Her last defense crumbled. That night became the first of many. But as the days passed, the guilt lingered. She would dress for church on Sunday, only to glance at him in the driver's seat and feel heat rise in her chest. She would sit at the dining table with him serving her wine, and her mind would drift to the memory of his hands, his lips, his weight against her. It was intoxicating, it was dangerous, and it was inevitable that someone would find out. The morning sun filtered into the bedroom through cream-colored curtains, casting soft patterns across the wide expanse of silk sheets. Mrs. Balogun sat at the edge of the bed, wrapped in a robe, her Bible open on her lap. She whispered prayers, words tumbling out like confessions. Lord, forgive me. Forgive this weakness in me. She had always been a woman of faith, a pillar in her church, a major donor, the woman the congregation admired for her elegance and unwavering devotion. But in the silence of her heart, she knew she had sinned. She had let loneliness carve a space so deep that she allowed a much younger man, a servant no less, to step into it. And yet, when she thought of Michael, she couldn't bring herself to regret it fully, because he wasn't just a man who touched her body. He was a man who had begun to heal her soul. Michael had not entered her world with innocence. When he first started working for the family, he had watched the widow from afar, noting her wealth, her connections, the soft vulnerability that lingered in her eyes even before her husband died. He was ambitious, hardened by a past of poverty and betrayal. In his mind, seducing her had always seemed like a possibility, a way to climb out of the pit of servitude into the ease of luxury. But after her husband's death, something changed. He saw her brokenness, her fragility. He told himself it was strategy when he stayed longer in the evenings, making sure she ate before going to bed. He told himself it was manipulation when he reminded her to take her blood pressure pills, or when he drove her to church without complaint, sitting patiently in the car for hours while she worshipped. But slowly, those acts stopped being tactics. They became instinct. He noticed how she always paused to feed the stray cats that lingered outside the mansion. He noticed how she prayed for everyone, her children, her staff, even him, when she thought no one was listening. And he began to feel ashamed of his earlier intentions. The night they first shared a bed had been passion, hunger, heat, but what followed was tenderness. He would knock softly on her door in the evenings, asking if she needed tea. Sometimes, he found her sitting alone in the living room, staring at old photographs of her late husband. He would sit across from her, silent, allowing her to grieve without judgment. And when her tears fell, he fetched her a handkerchief, his rough hands surprisingly gentle. The city of Lagos buzzed on, but inside the Ikoyi mansion, a strange new rhythm was forming. One afternoon, as the rain hammered down on the roof, she had been pacing the hallway, restless. He appeared quietly, holding a steaming bowl of pepper soup. "I made it myself," he said, almost shyly. She blinked, surprised. "You a cook?" He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "My mother taught me before she died." "You've barely eaten today, madam." She hesitated, then sat. He fed her carefully, watching her lips as they touched the spoon, his heart racing not with lust this time, but with a deep desire to care for her. Another time, when she had to attend a late-night vigil, he refused to let her drive alone. "It's dangerous at that hour," he insisted. When she argued that she didn't want gossip, her driver accompanying her to church at midnight, he only smiled. "Then let them gossip. At least you'll be safe." She was stunned at his boldness, but also warmed by it. Still, she struggled. Every night, she lay awake in her massive bed, praying, "Lord, take this temptation away. I don't want to dishonor you. I don't want to fall again." But temptation had already become something else. It wasn't just about the heat of his body. It was about the way he listened when no one else did. It was the way he looked at her as though she wasn't old, as though she wasn't used up, but as though she was radiant. And despite herself, she began to crave him not just in the darkness of the bedroom, but in the daylight of ordinary life. Michael, meanwhile, found his own heart caught in unfamiliar chains. He had planned to use her, to enjoy the comfort of her bed, to secure financial favors, maybe even to edge into her will. But every time he saw her kneeling in prayer, every time she spoke softly about her children abroad, or about her loneliness, he felt his plan dissolving. He admired her discipline, her grace, her faith, and in admiration he found himself falling. One evening, after driving her back from a women's fellowship, he parked quietly in the driveway. She lingered in the car, reluctant to leave. The mansion loomed ahead, dark and silent, while the world outside buzzed with nightlife and noise. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked suddenly. She turned, startled by the boldness of the question. Her lips parted, then closed again. Finally, She whispered, "Every day." Something broke inside him then. Not lust, not ambition, but a tenderness he could no longer deny. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to be the one who filled those empty spaces in her life. That night, when she finally kissed him again, it was no longer desperation. It was love, raw and unspoken. But love, especially a forbidden one, is never without consequences. Because though the mansion was silent, the world outside was watching. The staff whispered. Neighbors raised eyebrows at how often the driver was seen entering the main house after hours. And in London and America, her children, spoiled by inheritance and distance, began to grow suspicious when their mother's tone over the phone grew lighter, warmer. She thought her secret was safe. But secrets, no matter how deeply buried in silk sheets and whispered prayers, have a way of clawing themselves into the open. And when they did, the love that had grown out of admiration would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary, felt like a trap. Whispers had become loud enough to reach across oceans. The children of Chief Balogun, 3 of them, all educated abroad and accustomed to the best money could buy, began to sense something was wrong. Their mother's voice over the phone was too soft, too glowing. Her grief seemed to have thinned too quickly, and when they returned to Lagos for a surprise visit, they did not have to look far for answers. It was a maid who let it slip first. "Madam spends too much time with Oga Driver," she whispered, thinking she was simply gossiping. But in the children's ears, it was betrayal. They saw the signs themselves. Michael carrying trays into her private quarters. Michael lingering too close when she walked through the garden. Michael's shirts, once neatly pressed and formal, now replaced with casual clothing she herself had likely bought for him. And then came the moment that broke everything. One late evening, her eldest son, Connell, entered the mansion unexpectedly. He was greeted not by silence but by laughter. His mother's laughter, light and free, as she sat at the piano with Michael standing beside her, turning sheet music. The intimacy in their eyes was undeniable. Connell froze at the door, his face hardening. "What is going on here?" The laughter died instantly. The widow's hand trembled on the piano keys. Michael stepped back, but it was too late. The truth hung heavy in the air. The confrontation came swiftly. "Mother," Connell spat, his voice shaking with fury, "do you know what you're doing to this family's name? Sleeping with the driver? A boy young enough to be your son." Her cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin with dignity. "Do not speak to me as if I am a child. I know what I'm doing." Her daughter, Saad, joined in, eyes wide with disgust. "This is madness. You'll destroy everything Father built. Do you know what people are already saying? Do you know how embarrassing this is?" But the youngest, Dapo, was the cruelest. "He's using you, Mother. Can't you see it? He wants your money. He wants the inheritance that belongs to us." Michael tried to speak, his deep voice calm. "That's not true. I love your mother." The words set off an explosion. "Love?" Connell sneered. "You think you can stand in this house and talk about love? You're nothing but a driver, a servant. You've bewitched her, that's all." The widow rose to her feet, her eyes flashing with rare fire. "Enough. I will not let you insult him in this house." But her children had already made up their minds. The war began quietly. They froze her accounts. They pressured family lawyers. They began whisper campaigns among their friends and church members, painting their mother as a woman gone mad with lust, manipulated by a scheming young man. Invitations to parties and luncheons stopped. Her phone grew cold with silence. In the boardrooms where her late husband's name once commanded respect, her children began to circle like vultures. They moved assets, made deals, and cornered her authority until she felt her own life's foundation slipping away. Michael stood by her through it all. He held her hand when she cried. He cooked for her when her appetite vanished. He drove her to church even when people stared openly, whispering about the scandal. But he could not stop the storm. One night, Saad stormed into her mother's room with documents in hand. "You are rewriting your will, aren't you? Giving him what doesn't belong to him." Her mother's hands shook, but she spoke calmly. I have the right to decide where my wealth goes. Your father built this empire, yes, but I was by his side through it all. This is my life too. And Michael has given me more love in 1 year than I received in decades of lonely marriage. The slap that followed echoed in the room. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not retract her words. The final blow came not from gossip, nor from threats, but from betrayal within. Her youngest son, Dapo, in a fit of rage, hired men to follow Michael. One night, Michael was dragged from his car, beaten badly, and left on the roadside. He returned bruised, his lips split, his eyes swollen, but his love unbroken. They want me gone, he whispered, collapsing into her arms. Her heart shattered. She had lost her husband once. She could not lose again. But the war escalated further. Lawyers arrived at the mansion one morning with papers, contesting her mental stability. Her children were petitioning the court, claiming she was unfit to manage her wealth, that she had been manipulated by a younger man. They sought control of the entire estate. She stood in court, her hands trembling as she swore an oath on the Bible she loved so dearly. I am of sound mind, she declared, and I am in love. Do not punish me for finding happiness. But love in Lagos society was rarely enough against greed. In the end, the battle for inheritance consumed them all. The children's greed grew sharper, their hatred deeper. They were willing to see their mother humiliated in public, just to secure their fortune. Yet through it all, she clung to Michael. When the world spat on her, when her friends turned their backs, when her children disowned her, he remained. Bruised, mocked, called a gold digger, and worse, he remained. And she realized then, painfully, beautifully, that love, real love, wasn't about age or status. It was about presence, about choosing someone when everyone else turns away. But the story did not end with victory. The inheritance war dragged on. The children succeeded in seizing control of much of the estate. Michael, under pressure and threats, urged her to leave Lagos with him, to start anew elsewhere, to abandon the toxic grip of greed. She considered it. For the first time in her life, she thought of abandoning the empire she and her husband had built. But she looked at her children she had carried, raised, and loved, even in their cruelty, and her heart broke anew, because no matter how deeply they hurt her, they were still hers. She chose to stay. Michael kissed her hand one last time before walking out of the mansion that night. He promised to love her always, but he would not stand by and watch her be torn apart between him and her blood. And so she lost twice. Her children claimed the wealth, and her love walked away because greed had poisoned everything it touched. Years later, she sat alone again in the same mansion, the walls echoing with silence. Her Bible lay open on her lap. She whispered into the empty air, "Love knows no age, but greed knows no mercy." And she wept,